welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. Sorry for the delay. We experienced some technical difficulties here, and let's get our other host on the screen. All right, so this is another episode of the Talking Hobies webinar series, and my name is Rich McVeigh. I'm the president of the International Hobie Class Association and the host of these series. And we've been moving through a variety of topics in Hobie selling. And tonight's topic is all about sales and particularly Hobie sales. So these are brought to you by the International Hobie Class Association. And just for those that aren't familiar, I mean, we are a group of volunteers from around the world that organize and promote Hobie selling events. And we said we're a volunteer group. We're funded by our members. And if you are a member of the class, we thank you very much for your support. If you are not, we sincerely encourage you to consider joining the class and becoming a member and help support the community of Hobie selling around the world. And you can find more information about the Hobie class on the internet at hobieclass.com or on Facebook at IHA. It's IHA Hobie class as well. All right, so joining me tonight is Rob Jerry, our co-host. Who's Rob? Do you have your video yet?
No, I don't.
There you go. Okay, there we go. Welcome, Rob. All right, video on. Okay, so Rob's joining me as our co-host, and for those that haven't met Rob, he's a Hobie dealer from Syracuse, New York, and his business called South Bay Sail and Kayak. Say hello, Rob.
Hello. Thanks for joining us.
All right. So, in addition to being a longtime Hobie dealer, Rob's also a sailor, and he actively sails and races on many of the Hobie Cat boats, and has notably sailed this Hobie 16, the Hobie 17, the Hobie 20, the Tiger, and the Wildcat. And at least in 4 of those classes, he's been to world championships on the boat. So he's got a very diverse background and is a good person to join us tonight for a discussion of sales. So let me share a screen again, and we're gonna move through some pictures and talk about those. And just a couple business notes before we start. This is Zoom webinar for those that aren't familiar. And if you look around your screen, there'll be a little box that says Q&A. If you click on that, that's how you ask us questions. And there'll be that little box called chat, which you can chat with people on the webinar or with everyone. And we absolutely encourage your participation. So please do submit questions, and we will try to address them as we go. So, all right, so here we go. Screen. Okay, so we're going to try to cover a little bit of the history of sail making for the Hobie class, some of the changes over the years, as well as some maintenance, repair, and what we call best practices for sales. So in the beginning, all the sails were white. So here we have some of the really early pictures of Hobie 14s. So if you've been around Hobies for a while, you may have come across some of these really, really old ones from the early 70s. And the sailmaker's patch, which is a patch on the sail, usually down along where the gooseneck attaches on pretty much any sail, indicates who manufactured the sail. And the original sails were made by a company called McKibben. Very early on, McKibben was actually sort of joined Hobie Cat and was essentially absorbed into the Hobie Cat company and sort of ceased to exist as a separate company, and became what we now know as the Hobie Cat sail loft. Hobie Cat worldwide uses 2 sail lofts. So one is in Oceanside, California, and the other one is called Sails East. I don't know if they call it Sails West or not. They usually just call it Oceanside and Sails East, but those are the 2 lofts they use around the world. All right, Dacron, let's talk now a little bit about sales and a little bit about materials. So in the beginning, starting with the 14, the sales were made out of Dacron, and Dacron is a brand name for basically a polyester sailcloth. It's a woven cloth. There are many different types of Dacron cloth, and we'll come back to this as we go. Like I said, originally they were all white, and colors came later on. So originally, early on, they went into hull colors before they went into different sail colors. Sail colors came a few years later, and occasionally started out with kind of mostly a white sail with just one or two stripes of colors, and eventually went into full color designs that change every few years. And what I'm showing here are the two latest Hobie 16 sail designs that just were released in the last week or so, right, Rob?
Yeah, this they just came out for 2021. They're new sail colors, new sail patterns, and they look pretty good.
Yeah. So these that what typically happens is Hobie comes out with a sail pattern, and they'll use those patterns for usually a couple of years, and then they'll come out with a new pattern and something completely new. This has been what they've done for years. And there's a nice article in the Hotline that was published years ago, which you can find online, that has sort of a history of sail color patterns over the years from Hobie Cap, mostly in the North American market. But it's really interesting. A lot of people go and look at that and cite that and try to find the history of their sails and when they were made and what the colors were and things. For many years, custom colors have always been available. And maybe Rob, why don't you talk about that? I mean, my understanding is essentially you want a custom color combination. You start out with your dealer.
Yeah, so custom color is sort of a misnomer. It's more you can create your own pattern with the sail colors that they have available. So you can't come up with your own sail color, but you can come up with your own pattern. So using these colors that you see on the screen now, you can take any of those colors, take a pattern of the sail and place them where you want, and create your own pattern of sail colors, and basically be the only one out there like it. And it's pretty popular. There's a slight upcharge for it, but it's not outrageous. And like I said, a lot of people do it just so that they can be unique.
Yeah, definitely. We see some folks that use the same pattern repeatedly. They've kind of established their unique sort of identity with that sail pattern, and they use it over years on multiple sails and multiple boats. So.
Yep.
Yeah. What's usually the timeline to order a custom combination like that?
So it usually takes 4 to 8 weeks, give or take. And the main constraint on that is Hobie doesn't just run sales randomly. They'll do a boat and they'll run a bunch of sales for that boat. So you figure they have all the boats, including some of the kayak sales and stuff. So you have to get in line. So you place your order if you're lucky and they're building Hobie 16 sales or 14 sales, whatever you're ordering next in line, you're going to get it in that closer to the 4-week range. If they had just built the sail that you were ordering, you're going to be closer to the 8-week line range.
Gotcha. Good to know. All right. All right. So currently, Hobie Cat uses for most of the boats, they use a 6-ounce cloth, which is a heavier Dacron cloth, with the exception of the Bravo, which uses a 3.8-ounce cloth. And my understanding is in that heavier cloth of Dacron, the colors are a little bit more limited compared to, for example, like a Sunfish sail, which is a very lightweight cloth. There's many more colors on the market, and it's easier to purchase colors. So Hobie Cat is, somewhat limited. They have to purchase in quantity, and they have to purchase colors that are available. And from what I understand too, the color, they get essentially a custom run of the colors they want.
Yes, I believe they pick the colors they want, order large quantities of it, and they're basically custom dyed for them.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay.
Oh, you
So
got it.
here's just an example. This was a screenshot from one of those pages of the Hotline article I mentioned. You can find this online. We can probably post a link somewhere if you haven't seen it before, but it goes through sort of the years of the sales and the different colors that were available. And it's kind of nice to look at the history of them over time. I remember they used to publish these little cards at the dealer, and you would go and get them, and it would show the hull colors and the trampoline colors and the sail colors for that year as like a little handout, you know, when you went to the dealer, you could go home with.
That was before the internet. Now they just post it.
Yeah. All right. So custom event sales, we've seen these too. So I wanted to talk about these a little bit. So this is a newer technology that is available through Hobie Cat's Sales East Loft, primarily for events, sometimes for not so much for general order because they are all custom designs and custom made. But this is not, you know, a 1980 kind of situation. This is not a sticker stuck on a sail. This is not something that's applied that can be removed. This is a technology where the die is a custom design. It's on a computer design, and it's actually in the sailcloth. So it's similar to like a die sublimation type technique where you start out with a cloth and you basically infuse the dye of the design right into the cloth. And we've seen some spectacular designs like this, most recently at the 2019 World Championships here on the left. And this other one on the right with the kind of red and the flowery design was one that was used in Europe for one of their special events over there. But very striking, and I'm sure we'll see more of that for special events in the future. Okay, so moving on to Hobie 17 and Mylar laminates. So essentially, these are laminate sails. These are laminate cloths where, and there's different techniques to build the cloth that have come across for years. And the Hobie 17 was really the first one in the Hobie Cat family of boats to utilize this type of cloth. And this, as I understand, in the mid 1980s was really the state of the art in sailcloth for small sailboats. So it was a Dacron. Essentially, it was one side was Dacron, one side was Mylar, and they were laminated together. And this was a vertical cut sail versus a horizontal cut, which is what the traditional Hobie 16 and 14 sails are, and allowed for a lot of different sail designs. Now, Rob, you just were recently sailing on a 17. Why don't you talk about the sailcloth a little bit and your experience with that?
Yeah, so basically these sails, I think, came out of windsurfing, where the loads were higher and they didn't really want sails to stretch. Mylar pretty much does not stretch, period. So in sailboats, that's a good thing. The less things stretch, the more the forces that are created are directed directly to propelling the boat in the direction you want to go. So the Mylar and Dacron laminate was the original way to do that. One of the differences is whereas Dacron slowly stretches and kind of wears and it keeps going until finally it'll kind of fall apart. The Mylar laminates are really good, and then they are not. It's not that slow deterioration. It's like you keep using, and all of a sudden, I can't really use this anymore. And what happens is, speaking of the Mylar laminate on my 17 cell I just used, it started to come apart, and that's called delaminating. And that's where the Mylar starts separating from the Dacron. In more current sails, it's where the Mylar will just start kind of separating from itself and its different structural entities, which we'll probably get to later. But when it's holding up, it's a really great sail. It holds its shape much better, longer than Dacron, but when it goes, it goes.
Yeah, so exactly. We have a couple examples we'll show of that here shortly. So in more recent years, you know, the Hobie 20, the the Tiger, the FX1, the Wildcat, for example, all used Mylar, but used a more advanced cloth design compared to the original Hobie 17 design. So it had, you know, more advanced cloth, and it didn't have that same delamination problem we see with the Hobie 17. In that Tiger and the Wildcat actually use what cloth called Pentex now, which is a more advanced cloth compared to what was used here with the 17. All right, let's go on to Hobie 20. Okay, so Hobie 20 was sort of the next generation that came along in boat design and sailcloth. The boat had a Mylar mainsail. It was a different cloth, so there was like this reinforcing layer kind of sandwiched between the layers of Mylar that held the sail design. Although the jib was still a Dacron jib. It was a different type of Dacron cloth than the Hobie 16, but it was a Dacron jib.
Yeah.
These
So
seemed like they held up a little bit better longevity than the 17. Was that your experience as well, Rob?
they do hold up better. And it was basically the first step in a full Mylar sail with reinforcements as opposed to using a direct laminate of Mylar over Dacron. So that you're basically relying more on the Mylar itself as opposed to the Mylar reinforcing a Dacron sail. And then the jibs were still made in Dacron because Mylar does not like to crease. And as probably most of us know, jibs flag and get really beat up. And Mylar, especially the early Mylars, just wouldn't hold up to that type of abuse. So they stuck with a Dacron jib on that side of it.
All right. All right. Hobie Tiger. So sort of keeping, you know, moving into the generations here. So the Tiger is a Pentex mainsail, and on the left and right picture, you can see differently than the center picture. Originally, the Tiger went through a couple generations in sails, but originally it was the same thing. It was a Pentex Mylar mainsail with a Dacron jib. And then in later years, they switched, and you can see in the center picture, to a Mylar jib with battens to reinforce it and help with the flogging. You know, Rob, you competed on the Tiger for quite a while and went to at least one World Championships on it.
Yeah, so the kind of the development of the sail went along with other developments on the boat. And originally, you would tack the jib just as you would on pretty much any sloop rig catamaran. You'd release it on the leeward side, tack, sheet it back in. I forget the year when we made the change, but they went to self-tacking jibs. When they did that, it turned out the jibs don't flog that much. They just kind of slide across the track to the other side and start driving again. So once they stopped flogging, it became easier to use a Mylar jib on that. And then eventually they went to the fully battened jibs because the Mylar didn't really like to be roller furled, which the original jibs did. So once they stopped roller furling them, full battens, everything is geared on those boats to get them to go just that little bit faster. And that's kind of how the Mylar jibs came around on the Tiger, and then that just translated into the Wildcat.
All right, and perfect transition to the Wildcat. So some nice photos of the Wildcat and the sail design on that boat, which has stayed stable over the years. All right, so we did a couple of interesting things here now to show some incremental improvements of the sails over the years, and starting out with the 16 here. So on the left picture here, we have several sails laid up that Rob kindly did for us here with different vintages, with the oldest on the bottom and the newest on the top. So one thing you're going to see with the jib, the newest one is got a different cut than the ones on the bottom. So along about let's say the mid 90s, early to mid 90s. I don't recall the exact date, but there was a new cut for the jib. So this was a bit of an innovation. The jib is actually, in terms of square footage, is the same size, but what they made it was just a little bit skinnier and a little bit taller. And the real advantage here, if you look right at the bottom here of the clue plates on the jib, is you can see that the clue plate is, at least an inch shorter than the older sails. The advantage of that was really all about mass rake. It allowed you to carry more mass rake and still achieve that proper sheeting tension and leach tension on the jib. And we've learned over many, many years that the Hobie 16 sails very well and sails better with mass rake than without. So this was one of the sort of incremental changes over time to accommodate that and improve how the boat sails and performs. Right, there's been also a number of manufacturing improvements, which happened in roughly 1998. We're going to show some pictures of those. And in 2015, the company actually standardized Hobie 16 and Hobie 14 sail design worldwide. So prior to that, the sails were almost identical, but not completely. I sailed some boats in Europe roughly in the 2014, 2015 time frame. And while I didn't notice any difference in performance, I did see very slight differences in like the reinforcing patches in the corners and some of the stitching. It didn't feel any different in terms of how it sailed. I don't think it was significantly different, but they actually standardized that worldwide and the sails are totally identical now. Right. Click on the screen, Rich. Okay. All right, so some more incremental improvements. So, and the right two pictures. So our jibs. So these are really old jibs, and this is one is the head and one is the tack. And you can see that has this kind of suede leather patch there. And that was very early days. I don't know, do you recall what years those are from, Rob?
So I think the sale number on that boat was like 51,000, which would to me indicate mid to late 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Probably mid 70s, because late 70s they were almost 80,000.
Yeah. Okay. So these are like patches where the corners were sewn, and eventually they eliminated that and used different fittings to attach the wire that runs internal in the luff of the jib to the sailcloth. So that the one on the left here, the white jib, you can see now that's a very new jib, and shows an example of the wire sticking out in a little bit of light line there that is used to provide luff tension on the jib. All right, then in the far left picture is the jib clue plate, and that's changed over the years. So the older one on the bottom, the gold one, it had much smaller little rivets in it, and it was a softer sort of metal material, and the holes would elongate and the little rivets would corrode, and eventually they would have to be replaced because the plate would start to come off. The newer boats have this aluminum plate, you can see, and it's a gray in color. The holes are all reinforced, and the rivets are much more substantial. And in recent years, I have never seen any corrosion on those or any problems with those plates ever coming off. Have you seen that, Rob?
No, those, well, the plates themselves don't come apart. I think the problem with the other plates was you're using a brass plate and stainless rivets, so you got galvanic corrosion. With the new plates, the plate and the rivets all being aluminum, you don't get that. You don't have the dissimilar metals.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so some others now, mainsails. All right, so again, the better plates and all the tack, the clue. At the top here, you see there's a blue sail with it used to have a plastic headboard. Again, that would sort of come apart over time. A little grommet where the halyard hook would sort of fall out and have to be replaced. Those are much more substantial now. Actually, I have a better picture there coming up with the one on the right there. Next to it is a headboard also. Again, doesn't come apart, just works better. At the tack and the clue nail, you can see in the top left picture, there's this really substantial, grommet in there that is what attaches the tack and the clue. And again, it never comes apart, it never fails. And then in the top right photo, a little bit hard to see, the sails now all along the battens have sewn on plastic chafe strips. So you don't get any chafe on the sail from rubbing on the shrouds. You don't get any sort of black marks or anything on the sail. And it just eliminates a problem that, used to be you would chafe and you would have to eventually get the sail repaired there over years. And now that just doesn't happen anymore. All right, some more comparisons here. So far left is a cat fever sail. So Rob, why don't you just go through these? I mean, you laid these out here.
Yeah, so that cat fever sail, which is on the far left, blue, red, yellows, and oranges, that's the one that is from the mid 70s, 51,000, although most of the number isn't there anymore. That was, I think, along with Tequila Sunrise, probably one of the most popular sails Hobie ever made. And that is probably the way the sails were made from the original colored sails through till probably early 90s. Not many changes except for sail colors. The next sail over in the middle there, I probably should have brushed up on it, but I forgot the name of that sail. That's from, I think, around the early 2000s. And that's got some of the changes that Rich was talking about earlier. That one showed you the original aluminum plate that we were just discussing in the last photo. That has the newer sail materials that are now current, although in a different color, but same material. They've kind of standardized all the sail numbers to those bigger numbers, either black for light colors or white for darker colors, so that you can see them. And then moving all the way to the right, those sails are basically 2018, 2019 sail colors. They're called Tortola. They're just replaced this year with the new ones that we showed you earlier. And those, they've actually gone back to a brass plate, but they have the inserts in them. They're actually a heavier duty insert than was in the 2000 series sails that we looked at. And the other thing they've done, if you look closely, you can see kind of like white sticking out from underneath the clue plate. And they've actually reinforced where the clue plate attaches. Because one of the problems that the sails do have, which is unrelated to the material of the clue plate, is if the sail flogs a lot in heavy winds, you can actually flog the clue plates right off the sails. And so to help prevent that, they reinforced where they attach there with, actually, I think it's webbing. I don't even think it's Dacron. I think it's actually webbing. So it's a much stronger attachment point now. And so those are, they're always periodically making little improvements like that when they feel that it's a good idea and they identify a problem. So even though the sails are all cut the same, they're always trying to make them last longer and be better.
All right. Oh, click on the screen again. All right, so this was another interesting little layout exercise, Rob, with the Wildcat. It's, kind of emphasizes, modern sail design and 50 years of improvement, but it's also striking that it's really not that much bigger.
Yes. So the Wildcat sail is technically 5 square feet more sail area upwind than a 16. So it's almost the same sail area. On a boat that weighs, 75 pounds more, 70 pounds more, and is faster with only 5 square feet more sail area. But you can see the sails are much different.
So a much more higher aspect design. It's sort of a taller, thinner. The booms are shorter actually. The
Yep.
sail is taller. The jib is particularly striking in that it's so much thinner and so much, but not that much bigger. Significantly taller than the 16 jib.
Yeah, so the jib design is because of the spinnakers on the Wildcats and Tigers. Those are designed basically only to be more or less used upwind. They're out there going downwind, but when you put the spinnaker up, that's what's taking you downwind. On the 16s, on 18s, even 20s, you needed a bigger head sail to help you go downwind better because you didn't have a spinnaker. So they could take some of that sail area out of the jib, put it into the main, and it's more efficient for upwind. The spinnaker helps you go downwind. So it's kind of specialized in that regard.
All right. All right, a little more of the same, just different view here, but kind of shows the same thing, the comparison of the two sails on top of each other. All right, so we'll shift gears a little bit and now talk about problems, repairs, how to deal with them. So we've got a couple examples here of some sails that have some issues. So starting left to right. So the left one here, just above the boom, you can see that the what's called the luff tape, which is the material that wraps around the bolt rope, is ripped or just worn away, and the bolt rope is self-exposed. The one next to that on the right is the same sail, just on the other side. This is a pretty common situation with an older sail that's seen a lot of use. Right there at the bottom, when the sail goes in the track, it's a chafe point. If there's any sort of sharp edges down there, that can lead to chafing and lead to eventual ripping down there. But fortunately, this is something that's really easily dealt with by a professional sailmaker. It's a simple and inexpensive repair. But if it's not dealt with, it's going to create a real problem later on, which you can sort of see on the far right now. The blue sail on the far right is much more advanced example of the same problem, where really the whole bottom of it is ripped. The bolt rope is pulled away from the cloth. And even if you look, the little brass clue plate or tack plate, for the downhaul is torn right off the sail. So that blue sail is really one that is not usable in its current state. And if you tried to downhaul that, you would very likely rip the sail. Again, all of that's repairable, but it's not a do-it-yourself situation. It's something that really needs to go to a sailmaker. The middle one, the batten cap one, that's again a pretty common one. That when you put load on the battens, you put tension on the battens, there's pressure on that cap and it pushes against the mast as it goes up and down the mast track. And it can lead to chafe right there if there's too much tension, and eventually you get a little bit of a wear through or a little bit of a hole right there, right at the batten caps. Again, that easily is remedied by a sailmaker, but it is not something that's a do-it-yourself situation. The sailmaker will remove that cap and they'll basically just put a patch on that spot if that's the only place you have a problem. If you have that problem all the way up the sail, what they'll do is they'll actually take the luff tape and the luff rope off and put a new one on. And again, it's actually not that expensive to have that work done, and it kind of refurbishes the whole front edge of the sail along the luff tape there. All right, so where to go? Rob, you want to talk about this a little bit?
Yep. Okay, so sails generally are not something you're going to do yourself or fix yourself. Not that it's really anything different than sewing a pair of pants, except for the strength of the materials that you're going through. So what happens is most of your home machines just don't have the ability to sew these materials. And hence you kind of have to go to a sailmaker. That's the ideal place to take them. They're going to have the most expertise in repairing them. However, sailmakers aren't always around the corner. So you can also go to, believe it or not, a cobbler or shoe repair place, leather repair places, and canvas makers and canvas repair. And basically what they have is they have industrial strength machines that have the ability to sew the thicker sail material. If you're not sure where to go by you, again, you can call your local Hobie dealer. They probably have a list of sail makers or shops nearby that can do the work. Some dealers might even have a place on site that does it. We used to. We're working on doing that again. I'm pretty sure Phobe up in Toronto, I know they used to. I think they're still doing sales. And there are some others that have sell-offs right on site. There are also companies out there, if you do want to do it yourself, that sell kind of home-oriented, heavier duty machines. But it's generally a lot less expensive to have a sail maker fix your sail than spend $1,000 on a new sewing machine.
Mhm.
So those are the best ways to get your sails fixed. Some of the things you can do to help keep your sails from needing to be fixed. Rich showed the luff tape problems that you have. One of the other probably things that we come across more than anything else are rodents. For some reason, they like to eat sails. And you don't realize it till you're ready to go sailing in the spring, pull your sail out, nice big hole where a mouse got to it. So storage, especially in the winter, is important. You want to make sure that your sails are put somewhere ideally where there aren't any mice. If you can, don't leave your sails rolled up. If you can spread them out so that they're flat and they don't make like a homey place for mice, they'll be less likely to be eaten and damaged. And then you won't need to go see your sail maker in the spring. And then, Rich, you want to go over some
Yeah,
more?
so and keep in mind on sailmakers too. I mean, if there's not, I mean, this is the world of Amazon.com, right? So we get packages all the time, and shipping things is no big deal for anyone, right? So don't be afraid if there's no sailmaker right around the corner from you, that you could just ship your sail to a sailmaker easily and have it repaired, and they'll ship it right back to your door. There's no need for you to drive hundreds of miles. If you know, sure, if there's a local one, that's absolutely convenient. You know that's by far the preferred way. But and I think if you can't find one, I put that in there. Call your Hobie dealer. They're gonna at least have. If they can't do it themselves, they're gonna know where to tell you to go. But yeah, there's many places you can ship your sail to have it repaired. I mean, I live near Annapolis, Maryland, and I don't know, there's at least 6 major sail makers right near me to go to. So it's easy to find a place to get your sail taken care of. And we can offer advice on that too. So we know some folks that specialize in Hobie sails and sail repair, and we can help you find whatever you need as far as that. So don't fear. If you need advice, ask for help. We'll find you a place to get your sail taken care of. All right, maintenance. I think I have some things coming up on that, so let's move forward here. Oh, this is more repair stuff. Okay, so this is a little bit Hobie 17 stuff. We'll come back to maintenance in a moment here. So these are some photos that Rob took of a 17 sail. The middle one was the one I showed before with that luff cap wear through. A few more here just to highlight some of the things with the 17. And here's the delamination we were talking about earlier. So you can see now this sort of plasticky material, that's the Mylar, and it is coming off to the sail. And at first you see these little bubbles, where it's like just bubbling up and it's starting to separate, and eventually it starts breaking off in big sheets. And unfortunately, in this sailcloth, this is not really that much repairable. I mean, a small patch probably could be applied, but in general, once this starts, it's going to happen everywhere, and it's sort of an end of life scenario for a 17 sail. I don't know, Rob, you have any thoughts or comments on that?
Um, yeah, so what's hard to see in a picture is where it's delaminated is also pretty brittle, um, much more brittle than when the cell was new. And that's part of the delamination process, is that that mylar is just deteriorated along with not wanting to stick to the Dacron anymore. It really just wants to fall apart. And that's why you can kind of try to chase it and put patches everywhere, but it's just going to keep happening all over the sail because the mylar is just basically past its life expectancy.
Yep. Okay. All right. Some best practices now. So this is one I put in a few things here to show where people have common frustrations. So this is a jib batten and a Hobie 16 jib. So we showed examples before where you saw the jibs of different sizes, right? And we also showed ones where, the newer ones where the jib was a little bit different cut and it was narrower, right? So what happens often, when you get a batten, Hobie doesn't want to sell you a batten that's too short, right? So they sell battens that, are going to fit any sail. And in a lot of sails, they're going to be a little bit longer than you need. And that can contribute to the jib hanging up on the mast when you're tacking. So the practice here, the way you reduce that is you trim your batten as short as possible. And this one could probably even be trimmed a touch bit more, but this is what I'm trying to show here is you don't want that batten sticking out several inches from the leech of the sail. You want to trim it as tight as you can so it eliminates that hang up on the sail. All right. Okay, so we had a question come in about Pentex here, and we'll maybe touch with that now. Maybe Rob, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so Pentex goes back to the mylar aspect of it, and it lasts. As long as it's in one piece, it's usable. The problem is what's going to happen is when it goes, it's just going to kind of fall apart. And so you kind of want to stop using it before you're stuck out there and it rips from leech to luff at some point is usually what happens. And it usually happens probably right around where the window is in the bottom of the sail. Mm-hmm. And two things. One, the bottom of the sail takes a lot more abuse than the top of the sail. I mean, if you think about it, when you're rigging your boat in a breeze and it's flapping back and forth a little bit, that's bad for the sail. When you're tacking and it's flapping back and forth a little bit, that's when the sail takes its most abuse. And it's the bottom of the sail that does more flogging than the top of the sail. So that's why you generally see failures towards the bottom of the sails as opposed to the top. Even like on that 17 sail, it was delaminating more at the bottom than towards the top because that's where it bends the most. Mylar does not like to bend. An interesting thing is Dacron, the sail gets bigger over the life of its use because it stretches. Mylar actually gets smaller. When you put a crease in it, you'll never get that crease totally out of it. So if you lay an older Mylar sail on top of a brand new one, it's actually a little bit smaller because it just doesn't stretch back out again. And all those little creases also weaken the Mylar a little bit. And that's where eventually it's going to cause failure. So the more you can keep your Mylar sails, I say Mylar, Pentex is a newer generation Mylar, the longer they're going to last.
Okay.
Hope that answers your question. I don't have a time frame for it. There's way too many variables to say it's going to last X number of years or months.
Sure. Yep. All right. I put in a couple things next here. Again, in the best practices here are things that cause common confusion with newer folks, particularly with Hobie 16s. So the Hobie 16 has got a different sort of jib configuration than many small sailboats in that it has this internal luff wire in the jib. It's not unique in that. There are others that do that as well, but it is more uncommon in the catamaran world. I know some dinghies that have that same configuration and it functions exactly the same. So essentially the function, what causes confusion here is that the forestay and the jib. So, and how your tension you need to apply to rig the boat correctly. So the forestay is the wire that is there and is really just there to hold the mast up when your sails are down. Okay, and once the jib goes up, that internal wire in the jib, as we show here in this middle picture and the right picture, should carry 100% of the load. And the forestay, as you can see, should actually go completely slack. And there, while you are sailing, there should never, ever, ever be any tension on the forestay on a Hobie 16. The jib luff wire should carry the entire load while you're sailing. So, and what we actually do is use a bungee here, and I show in the middle picture, this bungee needs to be a little tighter, but the purpose of this is to kind of pull that wire forward, and so it doesn't have a lot of slack and it can't slap around and get itself into trouble getting caught on something. The other common one on the far left now is the jib sheet. And this,
Rich,
yes.
a comment about the jib?
Yeah, please.
Especially on newer sails where you're allowed to adjust the tension of the jib luff, you want to make sure that you don't tighten it. You want to take the wrinkles out of the sail, but you want to make sure that you're not putting so much tension on that sail that the wire inside goes slack. Mm-hmm. You can do that because now the load that wire is supposed to be taking is now being taken by the sail, and you will rip the grommets out of your sail because the sail just isn't strong enough to hold the mast up. So you just want to make sure that you have enough tension to properly tension the sail, but you don't want to take the load off that wire.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right. Okay, so the far left picture is an example of sort of the jib sheeting and jib sheeting tension, and kind of goes into mast rake as well, and why the jib cut was changed back in the early 90s. So essentially to rake your mast back, the limiting factors are really the geometry of the sails, and that you can only go so far, and then you will not have enough physical room to sheet in the jib properly and sheet in the main properly. So the jib configuration for the hardware, the cars have gotten smaller and have gotten lower profile, and essentially this one is sheeted in pretty snugly on the far left and shows just how tight that should be pulled in when you're going upwind in breezier conditions. And of note here is if you look at how the shackle is in the clew plate, this is a trick that the racing community uses to get just that extra little ½ inch in there by spanning that shackle sideways between two holes versus putting it in where it's sort of stuck through one hole and sticking down in a more conventional manner. And this is, if you're not familiar, is the current jib car that's used in production in North America and Australia boats, and is with the integrated track system. So.
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Yeah, okay, I want to come over almost through the slides here. So maintenance, storage, and just general advice here. So we talked about storage. The mice are a problem. I see a lot of people, not just Hobie cats, but all kinds of boats where the sails are just left out in the weather. You know, whether they're rolled up or not, whether they're in their bag or not. And this is just, I mean, sails are expensive, and this is a great way to destroy your sails by leaving them out in the weather. It's a simple thing to do. Make sure they're stored properly. They're in a dry place, out of the weather, out of the sun. You know, if possible, even indoors is best. In the season, I'll keep my sails in the sail box on the trailer, but my sail box is dry. It never gets any water in it. In the wintertime, I'll take them out of the box. I'll bring them in the house and store them in a place that's, you know, heated, dry, and away from rodents. I'm a big fan of keep it clean. So not just for sails, but for everything on the boat. Everything I think works better and has better longevity when you just keep it clean. Even something as simple as just rinsing it with fresh water.
What
Um,
now?
in the maintenance, another one, whether it's, sales or, cars or whatever, again, I like to, fix the little problems before they become big problems. Again, I think this is good advice and ultimately saves you a lot of money. And lastly, understand that sales are something that wear out. They're like tires on your car. They're not going to last forever. And yeah, sooner or later, they do need to be replaced. All right, so last year, and then we got a few other in the slides. I just left with a few pictures of what is essentially almost a brand new Hobie 16 sale. I think that the sales that Hobie Cat produces now are really a superior product to what was made years ago. And I think, you will be impressed, purchasing a new sale, you're going to be impressed. It's a very high quality sale. It's going to serve you for a long time. You're going to be really happy with it. All right, so let me stop the screen share there and we'll go back over here.
You're not selling?
All right, so anyway, any questions or comments, please be happy to stress those. And I had one other thing I wanted to share real quick here.
You gonna get it fixed? When? Oh, okay. Oh, boy. You gotta have it done up here?
Get to the right place. So I'm still hoping to do a factory tour at one of Hobie Cat's facilities. But unfortunately, they've just been so busy that they haven't had the time to be able to help us pull that off, which is great news for them and great news for the boating industry and the Hobie Cat community, but it hasn't helped me with my factory tour yet. So what I was able to find here is some footage from a few years ago that was done on Made in America that showed the sail loft in Oceanside. So let me just share that real quick.
Oh, yeah, use a boat, and we actually, tonight, we could fly.
All right.
Could you imagine drop ships fly together somewhere? Oh my God.
All right, here we go.
Each station, they do a different part of the sail. And the clear portion is obviously so you can exactly see the sail. So sitting down a little kind of, so you want to be able to get the traffic coming at you. Right. So that little window allows you to see right through this. If you're going over the edge of the earth. Oh, that's true. A computer-driven laser cuts the deck rod precisely. This is actually where we cut the sail. So we'll use a spotter cutter. It'll draw the lines and cut the panels out. Look how fast that thing is.
Right.
Victor Martinez mans the super scissors.
How far I get?
What does he do?
We're gonna cut the name America.
Oh, okay.
Yes, this is a surprise that we have for you.
It's not a surprise anymore, but thank you.
Here we go.
Yeah. A vacuum holds the fabric steady on the table. Made in America.
I don't know about that.
Okay, so that was just a little bit of footage I was able to find from the sail loft in Oceanside that thought was interesting to share. I visited there years ago. It's been a while, but it was, pretty impressive that in terms of the scope of it and the size of it, and the number of folks that were working in there to build sails.
Well, I'll take the big
Right.
in the morning. We're here.
So,
It's nice to go
any
back.
other questions or anything? And we're sort of towards the end of our presentation. Rob, you have anything from your end?
It looks like Wolfgang had a question about washing sails. You mentioned in the chat. So, would recommend being careful washing your sails. Rich did mentioned keeping things clean is important. But one of the things is, and this is more of a personal opinion on my part, but once sails are stained, I think you can do more damage to them getting the stains out than to the structure of the sail. And I think it's better to leave stains in sometimes than to try to get them out. There's some specific sail cleaners out there. That's what I would recommend using. I know Starbright is one called Sail and Canvas Cleaner. There's a couple others, but you don't want to start using bleaches and stuff because you'll actually do damage to the sail. You might get the stain out, but the sail might become very weak or even burn a hole through it. So there's some spot cleaners that you can get, and a lot of them you can just soak the sails in a cleaner, and they're pretty mild cleaners. So they're not going to take stains out, but they will clean off dirt and things like that. Hope.
Yeah, that's good points. And then on stains, I mean, it's always kind of I don't know. I hate it when you have a little capsize, you end up getting some mud on the sail. It's, but it happens to all of us. But you want to do what you can to get that mud off before it dries when that happens. Yes. So we'll go back to the sailing club or whatever after we're done sailing, whatever we launched from, and one of the first things we'll do after getting some mud on the sail is we'll get that sail down. We will get to a hose and we will do the best we can to rinse that mud off. Sometimes it's a little bit stubborn, and what I'll actually use is just get a bucket of soapy water and just a sponge and just try to gently massage the soap off without being too aggressive on the material, and lots of water. It seems like once that stuff dries, that stain is there with you forever. So that's my thoughts on stains, but do the best you can to. I also think you're better off doing everything you can to avoid getting a stain, whether it's from storage or mud or anything. They're just hard to get off once you get them on. So put the effort into avoiding it, storing your sail properly, avoiding stains, avoiding damage that come through just inadvertent staining or letting it sit somewhere. Questions here related to this. I mean, we have one from Bill asked about this company called sailcare.com, and I have seen them, and he asked if I have any experience. I have not had any experience with them in terms of their services. Rob, do you have any experience there?
I think I have come across them on the internet, but I do not know anyone who has used them. We have not. I haven't used them, but so unfortunately, I don't know.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. Other comments here. We have one person here. Jonathan asked about Jib Traveler, asking about line, and that actually could be a nice subject for a future webinar. Different lines. So lots of personal preferences in line selection. There's many choices that will work. Usually a thinner diameter that's going to fit into your Jib Traveler system. And there's been a variety of Jib Traveler systems out there over the years, so I can't give you a specific line size and say, go get that one. Find one that's going to fit into your system well. I want to say that current ones are probably about 3/16. Would that be about right, Rob?
Yes, 3/16. Don't want to use any. You kind of want to use the largest you can, which is about 3/16. Using smaller ones, you run the risk of it jumping the sheave and getting wedged.
Yes. Also not something that's good, but all right, good questions. All right, anything else we're missing here?
Don't think so.
All right, well, last call for questions here. All right. Well, thanks everyone. I hope this was informative and gave you some information about sales and a history of sales through the Hobie family of boats over the years, and some information to help you with your sales and taking good care of them over the years, and getting enjoyment out of your boat and your sales. So, like I said in the beginning, this was webinar series is by the International Hobie Class Association. We're sort of trying to do these once or twice a month. I think the next one we're going to do is going to be on parts and upgrades and things over the years with the boats. Rob's going to join me again for that. I have some international sailors I'm lining up for some future episodes. Hoping to do a session with some of our past world champions. I think might be interesting to hear about how they train and the things they do in different parts of the world. So stay tuned for that.
One last question, if you want, about jib cars on your built 16s.
Oh yeah, here we go. Where is that one?
It's on the chat.
Oh, on the chat. All right. Okay, there we go. From Karen Ann. Hello, Karen Ann. All right, so over the years, I mean, we've all seen many types of jib cars and jib car traveler systems, and a lot of them were from the Hobie Cat Company, and others were aftermarket. There was a very rich aftermarket for all these many of these parts. So where the current situation is, so there are still aftermarket items available. There's items, jib car systems that fit the older boats that are available through your dealers. And then there's, of course, there's what comes on a brand new boat, which is the subject of, I think, Karen Ann's question. So the Hobie Cat Company is, you know, a company that is, it's all one company with 3 manufacturing facilities essentially around the world. But years ago, they were owned independently. So in, I don't know, the last 5-10 years, I forget exactly, the company has sort of reformed itself as one entity again. And they've been in a process of standardizing the manufacturing of all the boats around the world. So, and they're pretty far along with that, but there is still a few differences. So, and some of it's little things like in Europe, you know, all the bolts and screws are metric. And in, you know, in North America, all the bolts and screws are English. And anyway, I won't get on a soapbox about that, but the jib car situation. So in North America and Australia, essentially the boat is identical. We can argue about the comp tip, that's an exception, of course, but the rest of the hardware on the boat is identical. In Europe, there is some hardware differences, and one of them is in the jib traveler systems and in the main sheet actual blocks. But let's talk about the jib car systems. So the jib car is a newer version of the Trentec jib car, which unfortunately I don't have a handy picture of, but it was this little plastic car with 4 holes in it that fit in your jib traveler track. And 2 of the holes were connecting the traveler line and the bungee into, or for the actual jib sheet. And then that car would move back and forth in the track, and the cleat was then fixed on the track, which is how we got Hobie 16s in North America were for many years, you know, years ago. The current system I can maybe back up to, the car is currently the car and the cleat are one integrated unit, and they move together in the North American boats. I've sailed with both of these systems. I've sailed a European boat recently. My feel is they both work, and they both work pretty well. I don't really have a big preference for one or the other. I think eventually they're going to standardize production and they'll pick one or the other. I don't know which one that'll be, but that's one of the few remaining differences in the boats. So anyway, hope that question, Karen Ann.
Yeah, today, nothing. And how long has it been?
All right. Anything else, Rob, I missed here? I'm looking through the chat.
There's ask about Hobie 16 masts and comp tips. I'm not sure what the question is. Is there any plans for the Hobie 16 mast?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, me neither. I don't think the comp tip's ever going to go away in the US.
Correct. That would be my sense of it as well. I mean, this is all done by, we don't manufacture the boats and set the rules for these things, but that would be my sense of it. That
Yeah.
Comtip's been with us since the 1980s, and it's going to continue to be with us.
Yeah. It just exposes them to too much liability.
Yeah. So, and from the point of view, I mean, of racing the boats, I mean, all the boats are the same. They all have comp tips. The playing field is even. So,
Right.
All right. Well, let's wrap up there. It's been just about an hour. Thanks for your patience with our delay there and to get started. Rich's computer was having some technical difficulties and needed a kick in the butt to turn the camera on. Anyway, we're glad you're able to join us tonight. And for those that, just for information, that missed it, this was recorded and we will publish it on YouTube so folks can watch it whenever they like. So stay tuned for future episodes, and thanks again for joining.
Thank you.